The day everything came apart. It started like any other. I awoke to the aroma of coffee, the faint sound of the shower running, and the distant hum of Lisa speaking on the phone. I didn't think much about it. She received calls early on occasion, but there was something strange about her voice. Too gentle, too careful. She seemed to be trying to keep a secret between her sentences. I leaned against the doorframe of our bedroom, half asleep and listening. And then? No, he is still asleep. Yeah, last night was incredible. A pause, followed by a low, throaty laugh that I hadn't heard in months. The kind she used to keep for me. I felt a pressure in my chest, but my brain rejected it. Couldn't be what I expected. I approached the restroom door, which was cracked open. I could just see her reflection in the mirror, wrapped in a towel, wet hair clinging to her shoulders. Lips twisted into a smug little smirk, as she listened to whoever was on the other end. My stomach twisted. Then she uttered something that made my blood turn cold. Do not worry about him. He is clueless. I'm not sure how long I stood there. It could have been seconds. Minutes. The sound of a shower dripping. The distant chirping of birds outside. Her voice was a quiet murmur. It all seemed too natural for what was happening. I should have burst in. I should have grabbed the phone from her hands and demanded the facts right now. But instead, I turned aside, heart pounding and mind racing. I needed substantial proof. So, I waited. Lisa wasn't the same that night. Too affectionate and too pleasant. She nestled up next to me on the couch, tracing languid circles on my arm, which she hadn't done in months. Guilt. That is what it was. Guilt is disguised as affection. I played along. I began to pay closer attention to her throughout the course of the next days. She was cautious, but not meticulous enough. I got glimpses of covert smiles on her phone text messages, as she angled away from me. Excuses that did not quite make sense. Then came the night I realized Lisa was in the shower again. Her phone sat on the nightstand, unsecured for the first time in weeks. My hands shook as I lifted it. My gut was already telling me what I was going to find. Before I could search, a text flashed up. I can still taste you. Same time tomorrow. The contact's name. Just the letter J. The room swirled. My vision was blurry around the borders. My hand squeezed around the phone so much that I felt I might crush it. I scanned through messages. Explicit. Intimate. Brutal. Every single one. A knife stabbed my ribcage. The final nail in the coffin. Picture them, not just her. Tangled up in the blankets of some motel bed. Her cheeks reddened. He wrapped his arm around her waist, like if he possessed her. As if I were nothing. The door to the bathroom opened. Steam billowed forth. Lisa stepped inside the bedroom. She put a towel around her torso and shook out her damp hair. She looked up. She froze when she saw me holding her phone. For the first time in our marriage, I witnessed it. The dread, the raw, naked shame flashed across her face before she pushed it down and attempted to play it off. I raised my eyes to hers and, without saying anything, turned the phone around so she could see what I was looking at. She made no attempt to dispute it, nor did she flinch. Instead, she rolled her eyes, sighed loudly, and delivered the words that destroyed everything I had left. Do not touch me. I cannot stand you. My ears began ringing. My vision clouded at the edges, and suddenly, in the coldest voice I'd ever heard, she added, I was about to tell you. I eventually figured out why, and she was astonished. The stillness between us was dense and stifling. Lisa did not appear ashamed. She did not appear terrified. If anything, she seemed annoyed that I had the nerve to interrupt her little romance. I stood there, squeezing the phone so firmly that my knuckles ached. My mind was like a hurricane, with thoughts clashing and crashing. But all I could say was, who is he? Lisa sighed. Not a guilty sigh. Not a regrettable one. Simply impatient. Does it matter? She replied, walking by me as if I were an inconvenience. She grabbed a lotion bottle off the drawer and began massaging it into her arms. Completely unconcerned. Does it matter? I let out a bitter, humorless laugh. This was not occurring. This was not real. I walked forward, making her look at me. Yes, Lisa, it matters. My voice shook, but I didn't mind. Who the hell is Jay? She didn't respond. Instead, she pulled the towel off her head, allowing her hair to cascade over her shoulders. Slowly, deliberately, she strolled up to the wardrobe, took out a nightgown, and pulled it over her head as if we were having a typical talk about groceries or the weather. I was going to demand a response when her phone vibrated in my hand. Jay sent another SMS. Tell him yet? I hope not. I love it when you are still his wife. The room tilted. I looked up at Lisa, expecting and praying she would show some regret. But she only smirked. I guess you know now, she continued, her voice light and even taunting. So, what are you planning to do about it? She said it as if she wasn't scared about losing me. As if she had already decided I was not worth fighting for. Something inside of me cracked. I tossed her phone against the wall, and it shattered upon impact, sending fragments flying across the floor. Lisa gasped, not in terror, but in sheer, undiluted wrath. "What's the F? Asterisk. Asterisk, David." She screamed and stepped forward. Hands clutched. "Are you insane? I am nuts." I laughed and shook my head. "You are sleeping with someone else, and I am the insane one." She rolled her eyes and walked past me again, grumbling. "Oh, grow up. Grow up." My pulse pounded in my skull, and my hands shook at my sides. "How long?" I pushed out through gritted teeth. Lisa did not respond soon away. She walked over to the dresser, grabbed a hairbrush, and began combing her damp hair, acting like it was just another Tuesday night. "Lisa." My voice sounded low. "Dangerous." "How long?" She looked at me in the mirror and eventually responded. "1 year. A year has passed since the air left my lungs." I staggered back as if she had physically struck me. 1 year. 12 months and 52 weeks. Every moment, everyone shared their supper. Every terrible inside joke, tainted. All while she was with another person. I could hardly breathe. "Why?" Lisa turned to face me completely, arms crossed across her chest. And then she said something that altered everything because I could. I stared at her, stunned to stillness. She stepped closer, dipping her head slightly. "Because you are predictable, David. Because you are safe. You've always been. And safe. Safe becomes boring." I felt like I was going to get sick. My hands tightened into fists by my sides. "So, you simply what? Have you decided to toss everything away because you were bored?" Lisa sighed, irritated. "Look, I hadn't planned for this to happen, okay? But then I met Jay, and I'm not sure. He makes me feel alive." I laughed bitterly. "Alive?" She nodded. "Yeah. Like I truly want to get up in the morning. Like I'm not just going through the motions with you." She waved her hand at me. This. I repeated with a hollow voice. "Yeah, this." She motioned between us as if we were just a poor business deal. "David, let's be honest. You're not particularly exciting." I sensed something deep within me. "Splinter." Lisa moaned again and rubbed her temples. "Look, if you're done with the big reaction thing, we should probably figure out what happens next." I blinked. "What happens next?" "Yeah. I mean, you are clearly upset. So, do you want a divorce? Do you want to be a big boy about it?" I couldn't believe what I heard. Be a big boy about it. My vision was blurry around the borders. My heart pumped with a tremendous roar in my ears. She had wrecked our marriage, lied to my face, and now she was acting as if it was my choice. Whether we stayed together or not, I should be glad that she gave me a choice. Lisa inclined her head again, waiting for a response. I took a slow breath. My mind races. She believed she had the upper hand. She felt she had won, but she had no idea what would happen next. That I did not respond to her. Not yet. I just stared at Lisa, the weight of her words sinking into my bones. Be a big boy about it. The brazen boldness and ruthlessness, camouflaged as casual indifference. Lisa stood there, looking at me as if she had already determined how this was going to go. As if I were simply another stumbling block on her path to the life she believed she deserved. But she didn't know me as well as she assumed. I forced my face into a neutral, unreadable expression. I needed to think. I needed to be smart. She expected a reaction. She wanted me to cry, yell, or plead, anything to give her more power. I would not give her that satisfaction. So I exhaled softly and stated, "I need a drink." Lisa blinked. For the first time, I noticed a glint of trepidation in her eyes. She had expected fury, possibly heartbreak. The calm threw her off. I turned. I walked out of the bedroom and went downstairs to the kitchen. My hands shook as I grabbed a glass and poured whiskey to the brim. I did not even enjoy whiskey. It was Lisa's favorite. I sipped. Allow the heat to anchor me. Then I removed my phone from my pocket. My mind was already working on putting together the next steps. Lisa believed she had control. She felt she had options. But she didn't realize I wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed. I went through my contacts until I located the name I was looking for. Mark. Mark was a longtime acquaintance. He also happened to be a private investigator. I sent him a text. Need a favor? Urgent. Within seconds, 3 dots emerged. What up? My wife is cheating. I need everything you have on the guy. Name, address, and job. Everything. Mark didn't even ask for more information. I'll get to it. Give me a few hours. I put down my phone. Exhale slowly. I had had enough of being the naive husband. Dan is the safe pick. If Lisa wanted to burn everything down, I would light the darn match myself. I heard a gentle shuffle of footsteps behind me. I did not turn around. I sensed her presence before she spoke. Are you taking it well? I took another sip and savored the flavor. Should I chuck things? Crying. I beg you to stay. Lisa leaned against the kitchen island. Arms crossed. I do not know. I was just expecting more of a reaction. I eventually turned to face her. What do you prefer? Should I fight for Lisa? Should I pretend that this marriage is salvageable? I took a step closer and lowered my voice. Or should I accept that you are going to leave anyway? She paused. Not much, but sufficient. She had not planned for this. She had been so confident. She had figured me out. I was convinced I would crumble. But now she was witnessing something fresh and dangerous. I set my glass down with a quiet clink. You said you would inform me eventually. Was that before or after you devised a robust backup strategy? Lisa's jaw stiffened. That's not right. Do not lie to me. She closed her mouth. I could see the calculation happening behind her eyes. You've been sleeping with him for 1 year. I kept my voice steady. You don't take such a risk unless you have an exit strategy. She did not refute it. That was all the assurance I needed. I picked up my glass again and swirled the liquid within. So, Lisa, what was the plan? Were you planning to empty our bank account first? Wait till you have a new location. Or were you going to disappear one day and leave me to figure it out on my own? Lisa inhaled sharply and shifted her weight. I was not going to disappear. I was going to chat to you, David. But you found out, and now the timelines have been pushed forward slightly. I finished for her. She flinched. Barely. It was my turn to smirk. Are you enjoying this? She accused. I tilted my head. Are you enjoying it now? But I'm watching you squirm. And I must confess, it's a pleasant change of pace. She scoffed and rolled her eyes. Jesus. You're always playing the victim. Victim? A sluggish, humorless laugh crept up my throat. You know what, Lisa? You're correct. I was the victim. But not anymore. Something flickered across her features, a hint of discomfort. She pushed off the counter. I am going to bed. You can stay down here and be sorry for yourself if you want. I let her depart since she had no idea what would happen next. I did not sleep that night. Lisa acted quietly. As if she hadn't just ripped away 6 years of marriage with a smug sneer and a shrug. I could hear her breathing in the hallway. Quiet and as if this was just another night for her. It was not for me. I sat in the dark living room, my thoughts racing through every memory, conversation, and situation from the previous year that I had discarded as insignificant. The unexpected late evenings at work, the strange business excursions that made no sense, a lack of affection. When I kissed her, she would draw away, as if she needed some distance. I'd been an idiot. A walking, breathing joke. At 2:34 a.m., my phone vibrated. Mark has everything you need. Call me. I had already started dialing before I finished reading. He picked up on the first ring. All right, he replied. Are you sitting down? Please tell me. Mark exhaled. Jason Carter is 36 and works in finance. But get this. He is married. My wife's name is Amanda. They have 2 kids. I closed my eyes and grabbed the bridge of my nose. Of course he is married, Mark continued. He's been renting a hotel room on Tuesdays and Thursdays for the past 6 months. The same area every time. The Ashton is located downtown. Something in my gut twisted. I knew Ashton. Lisa had mentioned it once, casually stating that her company occasionally booked it for out-of-town clients. The falsehoods were seamless and effortless. I forced my voice to remain even. Did you find anything on the wife? Is Amanda Carter? Yes, she is a lawyer. Corporate works, long hours. This is most likely why the jerk has so much free time. He paused. I can provide you her phone number if you want. I opened my mouth and closed it. My first thought was to say no. Pulling another person into this turmoil seemed harsh. But then I imagined Lisa sneering at me, rolling her eyes, and labeling me predictable. And I knew something. Lisa believed she had control. She believed she was going to win. I wasn't going to let it happen. Yes, I said. Please send me the number. The next morning, I resumed my typical behavior. Lisa came downstairs, stretching, yawning, and sneaking a drink of my coffee, as if she hadn't just confessed to a year-long affair. As if we were just another happy couple beginning their day. I allowed her. She sat across from me, scrolling through her replacement phone. Of course, she had already purchased a new one, and added, I'm going out for a while later. Meeting a friend. I stirred the coffee. Jason? Lisa froze. It only lasted a half second, but I noticed how her fingers clenched over her mug. Her eyes flickered up to mine, sharply scrutinizing. Excuse me, she said, tilting her head. I smiled. Not a pleasant one. Jason Carter, 36, works in finance. Married with 2 children. Rents out a hotel room at the Ashton twice a week. That. Jason? Lisa's face became drained of blood. I leaned forward and rested my elbows on the table. Oh, I apologize. Did you think I'd let you screw me over? Lisa gulped hard. She carefully set down her coffee, but I could see her hands trembling. How did you do that? I have my ways. I took a slow drink of coffee, enjoying the way she was unraveling in front of me. And now for the fun part, Lisa. I called his wife. Her eyes widened. You did what? I called his wife. Lisa's chair scratched against the floor as she stood up. David? You didn't. Oh yes, I did. I cut in with a strong voice. Amanda Carter knows everything. Every text, every hotel visit, and every last nasty detail. I tilted my head. How's that for predictability? Lisa's breathing was irregular. She clenched her hands at her sides. You had no rights. I stood up slowly and deliberately. No, right. I gave a quiet, humorless chuckle. Lisa, you blew apart our marriage. You spat in my face and ordered me to handle it like a man. And now you're furious because I didn't play fairly. Lisa's nostrils flared. This wasn't only about you. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, please enlighten me. What was this about? Lisa, you are bored. You need to feel alive. She groaned in annoyance and ran her hand through her hair. I do not know. UAF asterisk. King. Explanation. I took a step closer, lowering my voice to something fatal. No, but you still owe me a divorce. Her mouth slammed shut. I continued going. Amanda is kicking Jason out. He is about to lose everything. His home, his children. Sounds familiar? Lisa's breathing was sharp and uneven. I'd never seen her like this before. Cornered. And you? I continued with a quiet but merciless voice. You are about to lose everything. I'm taking the house. I am taking my money. And I'm making certain that when I walk away, you have nothing. She lunged at me, warning me not to hit myself. Lisa was too rational for that. But she snatched my arm. Nails digging in, voice desperate now. David, please wait. I shook her off. Too late. Lisa stumbled back. She stared at me, then really looked at me, and I saw it. She understood she'd lost. I moved back and grabbed my keys. Oh, and Lisa. I cast a glimpse at her over my shoulder. Be a big girl about it. And then I went out the door. I did not go to work that day. I did not go someplace familiar. Instead, I drove aimlessly, my mind replaying everything that had just happened. Lisa's expression when I mentioned Jason's wife revealed the way her confidence crumbled, splintering into something raw and desperate. She didn't expect me to fight back. She expected me to fall and concede defeat. But now she was trapped. By the time I got into a random parking lot, my phone had buzzed a familiar number. I recognized who it was before I even picked up David. Amanda heard a woman's voice, sharp and controlled. I greeted. There was a pause. Then, he begs. A laugh devoid of humor. I am truly crying. I had no idea he could accomplish that. I leaned back in my seat and exhaled through my nose. Did you let him stay? Hell no. The automobile door banged on her side. I told him to pack a suitcase and get the asterisk. Remove the asterisk. He attempted to gaslight me, of course. Said that was a mistake. That I was emotional and overreacted. Another sharp laugh. Overreacting? Imagine that. I shake my head. They constantly believe they can talk themselves out of it. She hummed. And your wife? She's in shock. Good. Silence stretched between us. I could hear Amanda's automobile motor in the background. Then her voice became softer. Thank you for informing me. I swallowed. You deserve to know. There was a pause. Then. What are you planning to do now? I exhaled softly while watching a bird peck at the asphalt a few feet away. Divorce her. Without hesitation. None. Another pause. Amanda spoke again, this time with a softer voice. If you need a lawyer, I know a few good ones. I gave a quick laugh. I may take you up on that. We did not say farewell. We have just hung up. 2 persons linked by betrayal. We're each dealing with it in our own way. When I arrived home, the house was quiet. Too quiet. I stepped inside and locked the door behind me. Something in the air seemed odd. Lisa was sitting on the couch, staring at the blank television screen. Her arms were crossed, and her claws dug into her skin. She did not glance up when I entered. I strolled by her into the kitchen, grabbed a water bottle, and wrenched its lid off. She still hasn't responded. I waited, then said barely above a whisper, "Are you truly planning to divorce me?" I sipped. Set the bottle down. Yes. She expelled a sharp, trembling breath. Just like that. I turned to face her completely. Just like that. Lisa raised her head. The eyes were ringed with red. I wasn't sure if she was crying or if she was just exhausted. In any case, she appeared disoriented, as if she couldn't believe what was going on. For the first time in my life, I felt empowered. She stood up abruptly, closing the distance between us. David, please. No. Her hands hovered around my arm, like if she wanted to touch me. Find a way to fix this. However, she didn't. You don't need to do this, she whispered. I have to. Bitter laughter. Oh, I sure do. She shakes her head. I'm desperate now. I have asterisks. Keep your head up. Okay. I know I was selfish and stupid. But, nothing. Lisa. My speech was calm and unshaken. You're not allowed to cheat on me for a year. Tell me to be a big boy, then beg me to stay when everything falls apart. Her eyes filled with something unreadable. Regret. Shame. Or was it simply terror at losing the security she assumed she would always have? She said, you are making a mistake. No, Lisa, I replied, going around her. The mistake was to trust you in the first place. She did not follow me as I walked upstairs. She did not try to stop me. She simply stayed there, watching everything fade away. For once, I didn't care. The divorce papers were on the kitchen table the following morning. Lisa stared at them as if they were a bomb about to explode. I sat across from her, arms folded and waiting. She had been pacing for the previous 15 minutes, running her hand through her hair, chewing her lip, and procrastinating. Are you serious? She eventually spoke. I didn't respond. She gave a bitter laugh and shook her head. You will not even try to remedy this. I arched my brow. What should be fixed? Lisa, the year-long romance. You looked me in the eyes and said you couldn't stand me. She flinched. Good. I tapped the papers, signed them. She did not move. David. Come on. Her voice had softened, coaxing. We have history. I tilted my head. You should have considered that before allowing another man. Asterisk. Asterisk? You stay at a hotel twice a week. Her lips form a tiny line. You don't need to be that harsh. I let out a short, unfunny laugh. Cruel. You acted cruelly. I'm simply cleaning up the mess. Lisa inhaled deeply and closed her eyes for a second. When she opened eyes again, she stopped pleading. No. Something else had settled there. Something colder. So, that's it? She spoke with a clipped voice. 6 years have passed. Just like that. I waited for the silence to break before responding. Yes, but you finished it a long time ago. She gulped hard. Her eyes returned to the papers, and her fingers flexed at her sides. She was analyzing her alternatives and attempting to determine her next action. And then, suddenly, the real Lisa appeared. She scoffed and rolled her eyes. You know what? Fine. Want to play hardball? Let's do it. She pulled the papers from the table. You think you can simply chuck me aside like garbage? Like I didn't mean anything. I remained completely still as she spiraled. Want to know why I cheated? She continued, her voice increasing. Because you are dull, David. Predictable. You go to work and come home. Every day, you repeat the identical asterisk, king pattern, like a goddamn robot. She slapped the papers down. You lost me before Jason even touched me. Something inside of me twisted. Not while in pain. Not with regrets. With disdain. I leaned forward and rested my elbows on the table. You lost me the moment you assumed I'd accept this. Lisa clenched her jaw. I stood up and grabbed my keys. Take your time with them. I nodded towards the papers. But do not take too long. I wouldn't want things to get messy. Her eyes were suspicious. What the hell does that mean? I smirked. You will see. Then I walked away, leaving her to ponder how badly she was going to lose. Lisa phoned me 6 times that day. I did not pick up. By the 6th, she had left a voicemail. I listened to it in the car parked outside a pub, allowing the words to pass through the speaker like poison. David, what the hell are you doing? Her voice was harsh. However, there was something more beneath it now. Fear. I know you're attempting to take advantage of me. Simply say it. Instead of acting like a mystery tough guy, simply state what you want to do. A shaky breath. You are not like this. You don't play games. I smirked. That's where she went wrong. I'd been playing her game for a year without recognizing it. Now? Now I was playing mine. I exited the car after deleting the voicemail. Amanda Carter was already inside the bar, waiting. She appeared different from when I originally chatted with her over the phone. Sharper? She looked less like the blindfolded wife from the day before, and more like someone prepared for war. David. She greeted and lifted her drink. I thought you'd back out. I settled into the seat across from her. Not a chance. She regarded me for a minute, her eyes calculating. Then she moved a folder across the table. Here's what I have on Jason. Bank documents, secret credit card statements, and spending. He didn't expect me to notice a dry chuckle. Men like him always believe we are blind. I opened the folder. My eyes skipped over transactions, revealing that the Ashton presents he had purchased were for Lisa, rather than his wife. Jewelry, designer handbags. I had seen a dress hanging in our wardrobe. I let out a leisurely exhalation. He truly believed he could have it all. Amanda leaned back and swirled the ice in her glass. That's the trouble with cheats. They don't consider the implications until it's too late. I looked up. So, what are your plans for Jason? Her lips curved into something vicious. I am taking everything. I grinned. That's what I prefer to hear. She nodded at me and Lisa. I closed the folder and laid my hand on top of it. She thinks I'm going to give her half of everything and walk away. Amanda tilted her head. And what exactly are you going to do? I leaned forward and lowered my voice. I am going to bury her. Her eyes fluttered with approval. We clinked our glasses. Lisa had no idea what would happen next. Lisa realized something was wrong. 2 days later, I was in the living room when she barged in. Her phone was clenched so tightly in her hand that I thought she'd snap it in half. David. She spat, her voice harsh and almost panicky. I took a slow sip of coffee. Morning. Cut the bullshit. She threw the phone on the coffee table. The screen was displaying an email from our mutual bank. Her accounts were frozen. I gave a little, contented hum. Lisa's hands shook, and you noticed it. You denied me access to our money. I set down my coffee and extended my arms behind my head. Technically, I have locked you out of my money. She blinked. David, we share that account. That money belonged to both of us. I arched my brow. Does it? I bent forward and rested my elbows on my knees. Because, last I looked, I was the one making the deposits. You were the one making the withdrawals. Lisa's face turned red. I smiled. Did you really think you'd walk away with half? Her eyes burned. This is how divorce works. Idiot. I am entitled to half. I breathed through my nose. You were till I hired a lawyer. Her expression froze. I stood there, towering over her. Did you aware that adultery can sometimes invalidate spousal support? I tilted my head. Amanda's lawyer has been quite helpful. By the way, corporate lawyers, brutal. Lisa's mouth opened, closed. Is it open again? You cannot. I shut her off. I could and did. She was losing it. Her fingers twitched at her sides, and nails dug into her palms. You're asterisk. Asterisk. King. Coward. David. I laughed cowardly. I moved closer, my voice falling to something murderous. Lisa, you spent a year sneaking around behind my back, lying to my face, allowing another man to touch you when you returned home, and acting as if nothing happened. And now that you're facing actual repercussions, you want to wail about fairness. She gulped hard. I made another stride, reducing the distance between us. You claimed I was predictable. I smirked. How about this for a surprise? Her breathing was irregular. I could see it now, as the reality set in. Lisa had never seen me like this. She'd spent so long believing she was in charge, that I was just a safe, boring husband who would never fight back. But now she was cornered. You're going to regret this, she said, her voice quivering. I tilted my head in amusement. I regret ever having loved you. But this, my lips curled. This is something I enjoy. Lisa inhaled sharply, like if I'd smacked her. I scooped up my coffee and turned away, rejecting her completely. Now, please excuse me, I have an appointment with my lawyer. You should definitely acquire one, too. If you are able to afford it. Her breath caught. I walked away, leaving her standing there, finally understanding what it was like to be powerless. Lisa did not speak with me for 2 days. I believe she was in shock. She had always had the upper hand and controlled the game. So, bit by piece, I was taking that power away from her. But after 3 days, she snapped. I had just arrived home from a meeting with my lawyer. Lisa was already waiting when I walked in. Arms crossed, foot tapping, eyes filled with raw wrath. Do you believe you're smart? She hissed. I locked the door behind me. I was able to outplay a woman who believed she could cheat on me and walk away with half my money. So, I'd think I'm pretty smart. Her nostrils flared. I should have left you long ago. I smirked. Did you try? You simply weren't fast enough. Lisa made a threatening stride forwards. Do you want to hurt me? Fine. But don't act like you're the perfect husband, David. She stabbed a finger at my chest. You disregarded me. You made me feel like a ghost inside my own home. I let out a slow, deliberate breath. So instead of speaking with me, you spread your legs for a married man. She slapped me hard. My head snapped to the side, and a searing sting spread across my jaw. But I did not move. Did not react. I just turned back to her, slowly, until our eyes met. Lisa froze because I was not upset. I was amused. Oh, sweetie. I whispered, keeping my voice quiet. That was the last mistake you'd make in this house. Her breath caught. I moved past her, taking a document from my bag and neatly arranging it on the kitchen counter. What's that? She inquired, voice kind. I looked to her and smiled. Is this your eviction notice? Her face had lost its color. You cannot. I shrugged. I could and did. Lisa's hands shook as she grabbed the paper and read the lines with disbelief. You're kicking me out of our home? I took a beer from the fridge, cracked it open, and leaned up against the counter. No, Lisa. I am kicking you out of my house. Her eyes met mine. They are full of hostility. The court will not allow you to do this. I took a slow sip from my drink. You need to read more carefully. It turns out that if one spouse cheats, the other can seek for exclusive use of the home during the divorce procedures. I grinned. I had a good case, because of the small adultery clause in our prenuptial agreement. Lisa's breath rushed out in loud, terrified rushes. I watched as the knowledge hit her. She was losing everything. Her money is gone, and her reputation is on fire. Her home is no longer hers. You have a week to get away. I added, having finished my beer, or the sheriff escorts you away. Lisa's hand trembled as she held the paper. I could see it happening, the fight leaving her, the walls collapsing. For the first time, she appeared terrified. I leaned in closer. I lowered my voice to something mild, even gentle. Lisa, be a big lady about this. She collapsed in a chair, and I went away. Lisa departed 4 days later, not because she wanted to, but because she had no choice. I arrived home that evening to find her seated on the floor, surrounded by half-packed boxes, and staring blankly at the wall for a brief period. She looked so little and defeated. If this had happened a month ago, I might have felt bad for her. Now I am just watching. Are you really going through with this? She murmured without looking at me. I leaned against the doorframe. Arms crossed. I already did. She let out a nervous breath. I'm not sure where to go. I arched my brow. Not my problem. Her head snapped upward, eyes flashing. Are you enjoying this? I tilted my head. Do you believe I should be suffering? Lisa scoffed and ran a hand through her hair. You don't need to be such a jerk about it. I pushed off the doorframe and approached her. You know, it's funny. You spent a year treating me as if I were nothing. As if I were just a dull, predictable husband. You had to tolerate. But now you have lost. Suddenly, I am the harsh one. She squeezed her lips together in a narrow line. I crouched down to her level, placing my elbows on my knees. Let me clarify one thing, Lisa. I did not do this to you. I pointed to the boxes. Did you? Her jaw clenched. Her breath was unsteady. David. I raised a hand. Now you can't say my name like that. Not anymore. She closed her mouth. I stood up. Exhale slowly. You should probably finish packing. Lisa gulped hard. So what if I don't? I took out my phone, tapped the screen and held it up. The sheriff's number. Her face fell. She stared at the phone for a long time, before forcing herself up from the floor. You don't really care, do you? I took a step backward. Not anymore. Lisa inhaled deeply, grabbing a box, and stuffing the last of her belongings inside. She was unraveling. Now, each movement was rigid, angry, desperate. She slammed the box closed. Knuckles are white. I hope you realize you've just lost the best thing that has ever occurred to you. I chuckled. Lisa, you are not even the best thing that has occurred to me this week. Her lips parted as if she wanted to shout, throw something at me, or say something hurtful. But she didn't have anything left. So she grabbed her suitcase and raced past me, pressing her shoulder against mine. I allowed her. The door swings open. She paused for only a second. She seemed to be waiting for me to stop her. I did not. She stepped outside and slammed the door shut behind her. Lisa vanished as quickly as she appeared. I exhaled slowly, glancing at the empty area where she had been. I expected to feel relief. I expected to feel vindicated. But what happened? I felt nothing. And that was the most satisfying feeling of all. Here's the next story. My wife made a big error and betrayed the decision-making process in our marriage. Can this marriage be saved? I sat in my office, playing the recording over and over. It was my wife, Chloe, speaking with her best friend, Stephanie. Stephanie? I messed up so terrible. I am afraid. Sean is going to be quite upset. Calm down. Chloe. I slept with James. What did I do? Steph? What did I do? What? Tell me what occurred. He's going to divorce me when I tell him. I couldn't live without him. Steph. I cannot. My wife was upset and in tears. Don't tell him. Are you out of your mind? Stephanie said I needed to inform him. I need to tell him and ask his forgiveness. No. You should keep your mouth shut and be the best wife ever. You deny him nothing. You do everything you can to let him know you love him. I have to tell him, Stephanie. Sean constantly believes that lying to your loved one is the worst thing you can do. No, you are simply being selfish again. Chloe. It will shatter his heart if you tell him. Look, I'm on my way over. Do not go anyplace. Don't call anyone. Don't do anything until I arrive. We chat. Update. That occurred 2 days ago, on Wednesday. I feigned to be sick Wednesday and Thursday nights, and slept in a guest room. I couldn't tolerate being near her. I have never had a woman in my life. But I must admit that the last 2 days have taxed my determination like never before. Fortunately, I worked for my father. I explained what had happened, and played the recording for him when it was finished. He reclined back in the chair and asked, "Aren't you glad for the prenup now, son?" My father had won the state lottery before my birth. He took the money and established his own construction company. By the time I graduated from high school at 18, it had become one of the most prosperous in the state. At graduation, I wasn't nearly 6 feet tall, and only weighed 160 pounds. My father instantly assigned me to work for him. He showed me no mercy or favoritism. I began as a general worker, pouring concrete, installing roofing and drywall, and even serving as the lunch gopher for one of the 3 crews to which I was assigned. The crews recognized me and gave me some roughness, but nothing too out of line. By my second year, at 19 I'd grown to 6 feet 2 inches and 225 pounds, and I'd earned the respect of all 3 crews. My father then required me to train and become licensed in a specialized trade and piece of machinery. Every year when I was 19 I got my class as CDL and started welding. At 20, it was a forklift. An electrician. At 21 it was excavators and plumbing. At 22 it was pipe fittings and wheel tractor scrapers. At 23 I was doing carpentry and operating a crane. During my 6th year, I learned from my father's top foreman. He was impressed by how quickly I took things up. By the end of the year, I had pretty much run all 3 crews. I was doing schedules, checking progress of all the sites, ensuring the sites were secure and orderly, and so on. I was 25 years old during my 7th year. I was making $70,000 each year, plus bonuses and extra work. I lived in a ranch-style home with 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a 2-car garage, and a basement. Today is my 25th birthday. My father purchased me a decrepit, abandoned piece of property that used to be an apartment complex on the outskirts of town. I got aid from my buddies. We ripped it down to the ground and erected my house. During the renovation, I met Chloe. She was a school teacher who worked as a landscaper during the summer. She worked at the nursery that I had hired to grow trees and bushes around my home and property. Chloe stands 5 feet, 5 inches tall and weighs 140 pounds. We both have blonde hair and blue eyes. The first time I saw her, she burst out laughing. She came out of her van, and I stared at her. She smiled and waved as she walked toward me. I recall her chatting right in front of me. I couldn't hear anything she was saying. I just stood there, jaw open. Finally, my father struck me in the face with a rag, and I snapped out of it. We went out several times before I kissed her goodnight. We were in our 5th month of dating, sitting in a booth at Outback Steakhouse. When she asked me, "How come you haven't made a move to make love with me yet?" I looked around and whispered, "I am a virgin." She burst out laughing. She followed me outside, apologizing, and I simply ignored her. I got into my truck and started it. I began backing out of the parking area, and she leaped onto the bed. I started driving down the road toward home. Chloe kept punching the window and apologizing. I simply turned up the radio. She finally received the message and sat down. It took me around 10 minutes to pull into my driveway. I parked outside my garage and stepped out. Chloe jumped out and slapped me across the face. "You could have killed me. You are the son of *PCH. I grabbed her up and tossed her over my shoulder. She asked where I was taking her. I merely remained silent and continued going. She finally placed her hands on my lower back and gazed up. "You'd best not, Sean," she yelled when she noticed me heading towards my pool. I threw her in. "We'll discuss after you've cooled off," I said. I turned around. I walked to my outdoor BBQ patio area and sat in a chair. Chloe walked up the sidewalk barefoot, her shoes in her hands, dripping wet. She marched up to me and shouted, "You ruined my clothes. Calm down, or I'll toss an asterisk at you again." I responded. Chloe simply scowled at me. Her angry expression was so endearing that I started laughing myself, and stood up. She dropped one of her shoes and began punching me with the other. She delivered a couple strikes to my open palm before I grabbed the shoe, removed it from her, and placed it down alongside her other shoe. She swung her hand, and I caught her by the wrist. She swung her second hand, and I grabbed the opposite wrist. I looked at her, and she looked at me defiantly. It was very lovely. I told her she was impolite, and she could sleep in the guest room. I'd take her back to the restaurant in the morning. Like heck, I am. She replied and began walking towards my rear door. I stood there watching her stroll into my house, spilling water everywhere. I wondered, what the hell have I gotten into this time? And he started laughing again. I picked up her shoes and began walking up the path halfway to the back door. I heard a door inside slam shut. I entered and shut the back door. I did not recall leaving it unlocked. I put her shoes at the front entrance and went to my bedroom. I opened my bedroom door to find Chloe rolling around on my bed. She was under my blanket, and on top of my sheet. I began pulling off my clothing. I grabbed up my clothing and headed to the laundry room. When I returned, Chloe was on her knees in the middle of my bed, still wearing her water-soaked blue dress. I stood there quietly and urged her to take off her wet clothes. I will get you something to wear tonight. As I approached my walk-in closet, you just want to see me like everyone else, she explained. I'd finally had enough. I paused, looking at her. Take off your wet garments, Chloe, I yelled. I strolled into my closet. I did not need to see her undress. I picked a t-shirt and sweatpants for her and headed out. Chloe was seated at the edge of my bed. I heard myself gasping. She looked really stunning. The moon was beaming through the large window on the south wall, illuminating her in a stunning light. I approached her to deliver her the garments. Chloe simply gazed at me. I assumed you didn't want me, she said. Who says that I did? I responded. Chloe said this as she grabbed me. That night, we crawled into bed and made love 3 times. It was the first time we said we loved each other. The next morning, when I took her back to the restaurant to retrieve her car, we discussed moving in together. I asked both of our families to my house for Christmas dinner that year, just before supper. I went down on one knee and asked her to marry me. She said yes with tears in her eyes and led me into the bedroom. We walked out of the bedroom an hour later, satisfied and smiling. Our mothers were in the kitchen, cleaning up. They smiled at us, and Chloe's mother cracked up. We saved you 2 tigers per plate. We all hugged each other. Chloe remained in the kitchen as I went looking for our fathers. I discovered them in the front room, watching football. I hugged them both and accepted their congratulations. I sat down at the end of the couch. A minute later, my father spoke. I'm not repairing the wall. You have just ruined, son. The 3 of us simply laughed. Chloe and I married the following summer. Stephanie was the maid of honor. My dad was my best man. Update 1. For 4 years, I thought I had the ideal marriage. We rarely fought. We had a great love life. We took 1 minor and 1 major vacation each year. We had employment security. We were financially secure. Our families get along great. We had recently finished converting one of the bedrooms into a nursery. We thought it was time to conceive a child and create our own small family. I was eventually brought back to reality. When my father entered my office, "Are you ready to do this, son?" he asked. I took a deep breath. No, I am not ducking. Ready? Who does the asterisk represent? L is always ready to do anything like this, I said. He sat in the chair across from my desk. We both sat there silently for a few minutes. My father finally spoke. She made an error, son. Ordering pancakes and receiving waffles is a mistake. Dad, ducking another person is not. My father reached into his pocket and pulled out his keys. He looked around before taking off a key. He threw it upon the desk in front of me. That is the secret to the RV. Take it and get away for a few weeks. You're still just too upset to make any decisions right now. I grabbed it up and examined it. Perhaps I should go locate James. The first told you wouldn't locate him, son. My father responded with a smile. Estimate that old is dead. I took a glance at him. No, maybe. Maybe not, he responded. I stood up, looked at him, and said, let's go. I left work and drove home, with my father following in his truck. I recalled the nice moments we had. I thought of the fun moments we were supposed to have. I was growing irritated as I got closer to home. I caught every red light along the way. I arrived in my driveway shortly before 12:30 p.m. I got halfway up my driveway and observed 4 cars parked. Chloe, her father's SUV, Stephanie's car, and my mother's car. I pulled over and got out of my pickup. Dad also got out. Did you tell your mother? I asked. Of course I did, son. I am not an idiot. If I didn't tell her about this, she would kill me. They are going to ambush me in there. What are your thoughts? I was thinking that I did not want your mother to contaminate my food. My father chuckled. My father came up to me and placed his hand on my shoulder. Look, son, I have your back. You are going to confront her anyhow. At the very least, you'll get everyone's point of view addressed at once. I don't want everyone's dismissive view, Dad. If I did, I'd already requested it. I know you're upset, son. I understand you're hurting. However, don't let your emotions lead you into a position where everything goes wrong. I'll deal with this garbage right now. I explained as I got into my pickup. Update 2, I drove the rest of the way home and parked in my garage. I took a few deep breaths to calm myself down. My father was correct. I didn't need to blast through the door like a wildfire. Tommy Rich. I got up and walked through the home, garage door, down the hall, and into the kitchen. My father met me. They're all in the front room, right? I will back any decision you make, son. I hugged and thanked my father. He's always been there for me. Now, in what has been one of the most difficult times in my life. He was standing right behind me. I turned and headed into my front room. I paused in the center of the room. I took in the spectacle before me. Chloe was sitting in the center of one of the couches. Her face was smeared with mascara from crying. On one side of her, her best friend Stephanie was holding her hand. Her mother was on the opposite side of her. She was clutching her other hand. I could tell she'd been crying as well. My mother was seated in the love seat by herself. She had a melancholy look on her face. Chloe's father was seated in my recliner, holding his usual thermos of coffee. I'm really sorry, Sean. Chloe stated this while glancing at me. Why did you duck him, Chloe? I responded to her. I was depressed and inebriated. I become depressed and drunk too. Chloe. I don't go out and duck anything. I responded with a raised voice. There was no reason to be harsh at all. Chloe's mother exited before her father interrupted. Keep your mouth shut, Beverly. We are here to provide moral support, not to express our opinions. I pulled out my phone and played the recording. Chloe began crying again. Stephanie drew her into her shoulder. I turned at Steph and noticed that she was also softly crying. Stephanie, you are just as terrible. You instructed her to lie and hide it from me. She simply looked at me. She is my best friend, Sean. What was I supposed to do? How about telling her to stop hiding it from me? I responded. I was about to tell you, sweetheart. Chloe has been clipped out. Do not call me that, I yelled. My father walked over to the love seat and sat beside my mother. I pointed at my parents and yelled at Chloe. That is what we were supposed to be. We can still be, Sean. Please forgive me. I've waited my entire life to give someone my heart and soul. I assumed you were the one. I am. Chloe wailed. I made an error. I regret making such a terrible mistake. You cannot undock. Cole, can you see the asterisk? I yelled. My mother joined in at this moment. Okay, that's enough. Sean, you're yelling and weeping. Chloe, I'm having a migraine. She released my father's hand and stood up. Chloe, you have broken my son's heart. You've damaged our family's hard-earned reputations. I treated you like the daughter I never had. My mother then turned to look at me. Son, I know she has crushed your heart. If you told her to go and never return, I would understand. And you would have my support. I also know that she is deeply sorry for what she has done. I am not telling you to keep her, but I am asking you to forgive her. You don't want to carry your anger and hurt for the rest of your life. I'm exhausted, so I'm heading home. Today has been a terrible day. I led my mother outside to her car. We hugged each other tight. She stared up at my tear-filled eyes. Take everything I've spoken to heart, son. Forgiveness is a symbol of strength, not weakness. She got into her car, and I watched her slowly drive away. I wiped the tears from my eyes and began walking back in. I was halfway along the sidewalk when Stephanie appeared. We both halted in our tracks and glanced at each other. She is devastated. Sean, Stephanie spoke, breaking the stillness. And I am tweeting rainbows with an asterisk. Steph, I responded, I can't imagine the pain you're experiencing, and I sincerely apologize for everything, including my small role in this. I'm not sure what I'm going to do, but I know this. I will never believe whatever your forked tongue says again. I responded by walking up to within a few feet of her. Sean, I won't speak to her again for the rest of my life. I promise you'll find a way to stay together. She choked out. I doubt it. I would do anything to make Chloe happy. You are already aware of this. She spoke with tears streaming down her cheeks. I came up next to her and whispered into her ear. So maybe we should find out then. Whiskers. As I moved away from her ear, I gazed directly at her. Her lips were trembling, and her eyes were watering. I mean every word of it, Sean, she said. Stephanie rushed past me, hopped into her car, and ripped rubber off my driveway. I walked into my front door. I could hear Chloe sobbing. My father met me there. I was looking over the crowd when I heard Stephanie's offer. That would be a dangerous path to go in order to feel better for a few nights. Son, you know better than that, father. I didn't have my first experience till I was 25 years old. I understand, son. My father hugged me and said, I am just reminding you of the man you are. We split away and entered my front room. Chloe's father had taken Stephanie's spot next to her. She cried as she leaned against her mother. There was a part of me that was hurt by her crying. I adore Chloe. She's gorgeous, loving, intelligent, hardworking, and enjoyable to be around. She looked up and noticed me staring at her. She rose up and began to walk towards me. Tears were flowing down her face. She dropped to her knees in front of me and clasped her hands together, staring up at me. I pledge to God that I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you. I beg you, Sean. Please, give me another opportunity. My heart was broken. I, too, have tears in my eyes. I looked down at my wife, Chloe, who was pleading me. I could see the agony in her eyes. I could hear it in her voice. It is the sound of desperation. It's that indescribable sound that you only know when you hear it. It's like begging with God to spare your life. When you're in so much pain, you can't take it. I overheard her mother sobbing. I looked up to see Beverly being held by Chloe's father, her head buried in his shoulder and his arms wrapped around her. I could see the pain on his face. Everyone was hurting. I turned around to see that my father, my rock, the man who has always been there for me, from Pee-wee football to my first date to being my best man, was in tears as he reached behind him and pulled out the manila envelope. It was like living in slow motion, only in real time. Chloe saw the envelope in my palm and collapsed on her hand, sobbing, her back heaving up and down as her body struggled to get air into her lungs between songs. I could hear her saying, "Please God, no, no." I often looked up to her parents. Both of them were crying now, seeing their daughter in such misery and knowing there was nothing they could do to help. I pushed the aluminum clasps together, opened the flap, and removed the papers. I knelt in front of Chloe, holding her forehead in her hands. She was moving her entire head back and forth. I set the papers down on the floor in front of her, then stood up and took 2 steps back. Her parents got up from the couch. Her mother hurried to her side, while her father approached her. My own father approached and stood right at my side. Beverly dropped to her knees and hugged herself to Chloe. Bill kneeled alongside his daughter and picked up the papers to examine them. He looked up at me through tears and murmured into Chloe's ear. Chloe lifted her head from her hands as Bill placed the papers where she could view them. During this time, my father placed his hand on my shoulder and whispered, "You made the correct decision, son." I closed my eyes, placed my palm on his, and stated, "I know I did that." I looked down in time to see Chloe place her hands over my mouth and begin to rise up. Beverly was on her knees, while Bill remained on one knee. My father approached Beverly and began helping her up. Bill placed the papers on the floor and took a long breath. Inside and outside. Chloe put her head in my chest and cried even more. I looked over to my father, Beverly, and Bill. Her parents were now standing, glancing at the documents. My father was behind them. I smiled and nodded to my father. He grinned and nodded back. I gazed down at Chloe, who looked up at me. Her beautiful eyes, which I fell in love with, were bloodshot from sobbing so much. I will never forgive myself for what I did. I'm deeply sorry, Sean. Chloe spoke. I leaned down and kissed her on the forehead. It is time for everyone to leave, I said. My father and Bill shook hands. Chloe and Beverly hugged and wept. My father came over to hug me. The path to recovery is riddled with potholes and detours. But what's dead is dead, and it won't come back, he continued. I am aware of this. I will walk them out, son. And he did. I strolled over to the couch, sat at the end, and let my head fall onto the back cushions. What a great day, I whispered aloud as Chloe snuggled against my side. I do not deserve you, honey, but I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret giving me another chance to show you how much I genuinely love you. She said this while crying gently. Epilogue. Before the weekend was over, Chloe had downloaded a tracking app onto my phone. She wanted me to know where she was at all times. The first weekend, all she wanted to do was cuddle. She told me she was afraid she would wake up and realize it was all a dream, and that she had lost me. There were some difficult periods. She was very afraid of me altering my mind. She became rather possessive for a while. She kicked several males she felt were flirting with her, and it took nearly 2 months before Chloe and I found love again. That was after she had been cleared of any STDs. We had several instances where we got started. The image of her ducking James flooded my head, and I lost my composure. Then one day, I returned home late from a job site and saw her sleeping on the couch. She wore one of my shirts. She looked so lovely that I entered the front room. We cried together and fell asleep on the couch that night, hugging each other. That night became even more memorable. When 8.5 months later, she gave birth to our twins, Nicole and Abigail. Things between Stephanie and me have thawed somewhat. Chloe and she are still close friends. I told Chloe what I had said to Stephanie on the front porch that day. She was upset with me for that. Lol. Not because I intimated to Steph that I would avoid her, but because I addressed her by the name she was taunted with in high school. Whiskers. Chloe once informed me that if I got a vengeance duck, she'd rather be Stephanie. Steph turned 50 colors of red, due to flushing. Chloe has demonstrated that she truly loves me, and I am not concerned about her cheating again. I watched the heartbreaking suffering she went through as a result of her mistake. And, to be honest, I really like the additional attention and love both inside and outside the bedroom. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened. Take care.